Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to talk to you about season 2, the finale. Talk to you guys about how the contest all went down, who I at the last minute thought these people were, and ultimately talking about the season as a whole, whether ultimately I had picked uh, frequently right or frequently wrong. But let's kind of just say, just let you know, you can go down in the link in the description to donate to the channel. For any reason with this season being over, there might not be as many views going into the channel. So a donation really helps. If you're brand new to all this, maybe you might otherwise want to subscribe to otherwise get some heads up of when I'll get back to this, or when in fact I'll keep on going along with this season, what have you. Maybe I'll look at some clues for season 3 and kind of look at those and what have you, or whatever. Anyways, but I don't know if I really want to do that. I just kind of want to keep the shows as they are. I don't want to try and guess what the next thing is before it even comes out. Anyways, for season 2, we are at the final episode, and we have 3 singers left. Who did I ever think any of these characters were? And I'm not gonna tell you in a 2-hour like span of clues for people. Ultimately, the flamingo, I'd assumed Fantasia, and so did Robin Thicke, but then eventually he kind of stayed away from that guess. Eventually, because people had mentioned it or Google had mentioned it, Adrienne Bailar was the biggest guess for the flamingo. And you know what? The last couple of performances, I kind of really did get closer to that guess. So realistically, Adrienne Bailar was really my actual guess for the flamingo. The fox, I ultimately, for the longest time, had guessed Jamie Foxx. Funny enough. But then while like the last couple of performances, I'm like, okay, this isn't Jamie Foxx anymore. Sounds very much more like Wayne Brady, and I was kind of on the Wayne Brady train for a little bit of a while. Now that I could clearly hear the voice of the fox, I can make that determination. And then the Rottweiler, from day one. From day one, I was like, this is Chris Daughtry. Clearly, it's Daughtry. From day one, I was assuming that it was Daughtry. Every single one of the guesses were always something from out of left field, where it was Jared Leto. Jason Mraz was something that came up tonight. The guy who's the lead singer of Train came up. All kinds of out there, way bizarre-ish like guesses. People from Glee, people from anywhere this person could be, they have guessed it. And every single time, I would otherwise just naturally assume you're wrong. I'm like, you're wrong. It's Daughtry. It's got to be Daughtry. If I'm wrong, then reasonably, my guess to win this whole show was the Rottweiler. I was like, please let the Rottweiler win this show. Please let him win this show. I was like, if he loses this show, I'm just gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it if he doesn't win this show. And now I guess it's the time for us to say who had ultimately been in the running and who ended up winning this show, and then unmask each one of these people as they had gotten unmasked on the show. So, If you didn't want to sit through a 2 hour show, because man, was this a very long winded effing show. Kind of a whole entire season review and what have you, and this entire 2 hour show. They could have just had the whole entire cast sing at some point, but they didn't. They just had a review of the entire season, which was effing bizarre. Anyways, and then too, like you really didn't like it just seemed like any of the other people probably weren't even there. Like they didn't like actually show like they didn't like unmask the people on the season finale and like it might not have been Johnny Weir, it might not have been Ninja, it might not have been any of those people actually on the show, weirdly enough, and what have you. It could have just been someone that's their double or whatever. Anyways, so for this, if you hadn't seen the season finale, you can check it out on Hulu. That's the only place you can go through to see it right now. But yeah, or you can check it some of the stuff out on YouTube and what have you. So now we're just gonna kind of go into what places people were in and who ultimately won, and then we're going to mask everyone. So this is spoiler time. If you don't want to know, go somewhere else. But if you already know, then go through all of the things with me and see if I won or lost this season. Because, like I had said in the last videos before, if I pick one character correct, I will have tied this season. If I pick more than one correct, I'll have won this season for guessing. If I get everyone right or I get everyone wrong, it'll be the difference between winning and losing. So ultimately, now, spoiler times. We're going to tell you who got third, second, and first. Now, ultimately, I'm gonna talk about performances and stuff like that also. Man, the Rottweiler throughout this entire season has just been mind-blowingly great. God, I really enjoyed every one of his songs. Every one of his songs were just so good and so well done and so what have you. And the Flamingo, like, consistently has had some good tunes. Consistently just kind of um consistently just kind of is kind of really just had a really big voice. The Fox ultimately, at a lot of points, I almost assumed would go home at points. Really, not that there's anything wrong with his sound. I just didn't know if his sound was going to be effective enough to reach people and to be able to get people just like, I want him to win, or I want him to whatever, or this and that, and what have you. So, let's talk about third place, and second place, and first place. Third place was ultimately the Flamingo. She had sang a Tina Turner song, "Rolling Down the River" or "Proud Mary" or whatever that song was. And I was like, it's a good, that's a really good song, but it's kind of weird to have it be a song to leave off on. Like, I don't know if I would have taken that, but I guess with her, it's like with Flamingo, it's like, man, I've done so many effing songs. It's like, why not just do this one? For third place, the Flamingo, and I'm going to unmask these right after I go into who eventually won this season. Second place. And I was like, man, Rottweiler, he's going to win this season. he's gonna win this season. Then I'm thinking, it's like, well, like the Fox did have a good song tonight. The Fox did kind of like, he kind of broke down emotionally, and maybe that'll get a lot of people on his side. But I don't know. Maybe the Rottweiler will be able to pull it out. Maybe the Rottweiler will win, or maybe the Fox will win, and then I'll just be like, ah. So second place was the Rottweiler, a person that has been consistently great, but just comes up short at everything that he tends to do. He just comes up short. I don't know why. I don't know why. God, why? Why does he always end up short? I don't get why. I don't understand. I don't understand it. Oh, God, why? The Fox is the winner of season 2. And I'm like, well, bravo to him. Like, good for him. Like, there's, like, ultimately, I'm just kind of like, for who that I thought that this was. Like, yeah, I've really loved his music over the years, or loved him doing music over the years. I've really enjoyed him as a talent that has been put in place in many other avenues and what have yous. So recently, I was just kind of like, well, it's just too bad the Rottweiler didn't win. But ultimately, I'm just like, well, it went to a good person. Ultimately, it went to either one of these characters would have been put to a good place. It wouldn't have been wasted by any means. So ultimately, that's who it is. That's what it is. So let's get on to now the unmasking on if I was wrong and or right this season, if I just tied it up for the season and I could ultimately be okay with that, or what have you. So, if I am wrong about the flamingo, it may not still matter because I just need to get one right. So, now, double five time, really quickly though, we are going to go and unmask the flamingo. So, the flamingo was Adrian Bylar Holton, or Holton, actress, singer, and co-host of The Real, whatever that is. I don't know what The Real is. I don't know what the real deal on that real show is. I don't know. I've never heard of it. But I have heard of a little thing called Cheetah because they frequently mention this on the show. Probably for a while, I just assumed that this was either one of two people. It was either Fantasia or some other oddball thing. But I think the last couple of performances has kind of swayed me into the Adrian um, way of thinking. Towards just like, well, yeah, it's clearly this person. Like now you can actually clearly hear them. You can clearly tell that it is this person, and I don't know if I can think of anybody else. So ultimately, when this person did get unmasked, I was like, okay, another win on the win column. So now we had tied up this entire season. So ultimately, I was just like, okay, so basically now, if I get everyone wrong, then I still have a thing that I can say. It's like, well, at least 50% of my guesses were correct. You could ultimately say that some of my guesses weren't exactly all mine. Some of them were from help from Google, or some of them were from help from people that just commented on videos. Um, so ultimately, Kristen had been a very good help through some of these guesses. Ultimately, a lot of the guesses were shots in the dark this season compared to the first one, and ultimately, man, I really should have done this like way earlier, just doing it from season one on. But I really didn't know if like people would really care about me like guessing through these and what have you, and guessing them wrong or right. But I also realized that there wasn't a lot of people doing the Masked Singer on YouTube, so I'm like, well, why not? Like, I enjoy the show as much as anybody else, so why not just do an episode review and what have you? So, Adrian Bailar, or Bailon, if I've been pronouncing this entire thing wrong and incorrectly, I apologize, but otherwise, let's move on. Since the Rottweiler had been number two, second place, man, now we're gonna unmask the Rottweiler. I'm not bitter about it. It's just like, uh, I just ultimately hope that at least I was right on Rottweiler, because I've just been holding on to this thing since day one, and I like just naturally assumed like forever I knew who this was, and ultimately I was just like, oh my god, please don't tell me that I've been holding on to this since day one, and then I'm gonna and then when they finally get to the unmasking, I'm going to be wrong. Please don't do this. Like, I've known for the longest time that it's this person. So now, let's give you a 5 count, and then we'll unmask the Rottweiler. Second place, the Rottweiler, had been Chris Daughtry. Again, a person that I'd guessed from day zero that it was the Rottweiler. Even before the show even started, I'm like, Daughtry. No. Basically, as soon as I started hearing the very first song, Maneater, I'm like, this is Chris Daughtry. Like, easily. And how there has never been one hesitation about the judges. Never one judge had come with any kind of guess of Daughtry. And how I'm sure eventually once he finally unmasked himself, all the judges were like, oh my god, I can't believe I never guessed Daughtry. Me neither. No one has ever guessed Daughtry, and it just blew my mind. I was like, man, this is Daughtry is such a huge recording artist, and he made a lot better record sales than most of the other American Idol contestants combined. Like, ultimately, he's done better record sales than most of the people that won that show, ultimately. So, maybe, I don't know about Kelly Clarkson at this point, but because she's been on The Voice and what have you. But, anyways, man, it's finally good to ultimately see that a person that I've really enjoyed for a very long time with music is actually on the show. It's great. Because I've really enjoyed Daughtry's music for a very long time. So it's great to have had somebody on here. And they had really good music throughout this entire thing. Every single song, I was like, this is really good. I'm really enjoying this song. It never seemed like there was one time where like Rottweiler had done any song that felt really just kind of bland to me at any point. It was like, no, every one of these songs just sounded really good. And at a lot of times too, Daughtry had been doing a lot of covers off to the side. Daughtry had done the cover "Bring Me to Life." You can see that somewhere. He did a video of it somewhere. So ultimately, like, Daughtry has been doing covers other than like American Idol. He had been doing things here and there about other music. So ultimately, yeah, I can see where yeah. But yeah, that is another win on the win column, a giant win on the win column, because From day one, I had never looked this up. I had never I had never went to Google for this answer. I never went to anybody for this answer. This was my own answer since day one, and I never wavered. I never changed my decision, and ultimately, I was correct. A real feel good win. Um, but it's just a shame that the Rottweiler, Chris Daughtry, did not win the show. God, how he always just comes up short. Sadly enough, on American Idol, he didn't. He was kind of like the runner-up from that. I think he was within the like final four of that. Sadly enough, and then he goes on this show and he gets second place. I'm just like, man, Daughtry, I love you, buddy, but oh, it's so heartbreaking. But ultimately, it's to getting to see Daughtry and to see ultimately what he's been doing lately, and to see him doing a variety of different music besides what he had done through American Idol, and ultimately what he's done through just music in general. It's great. So yeah, so thank you, Daughtry, for being on the show. Because, man, I really enjoy his music, and I have um, ultimately just wanted people who I actually really, really admire and what have you being on the show. So that's great. So now, the Fox had won this season. So for this reason, I'm going to give you a 5 count, and then we are going to unmask the Fox. If anything, I really did really enjoy how like the Rottweiler and the Fox kind of had this kind of like big kind of like, or not big, but it kind of, they just kind of had this like hug thing to really just be like, hey man, like best of luck and kind of thing, like kind of hug it out, and just before they announce the winner. Like that was really great. That was really great of the Fox to kind of go out there and just be like, hey, no matter what happens, it's like this is a great run. So now we are going to unmask the winner of season 2, Wayne Brady. If anything, of course, Daughtry had been on shows like CSI, and he's been on the American Idol. He was a singer, song, record artist, and what have you. If anything, he's currently being doing some stuff with comic books lately, like I had mentioned on other episodes, doing some Batman books and stuff like that. So, yeah. Wayne Brady had won this season. And for a lot of reasons, I'm like, makes sense. Wayne Brady had always had like a huge female audience following on Whose Line Is It Anyways. A lot of women really enjoyed his voice. Ultimately, it seemed like a lot of the times Wayne Brady would be the winner at the end of the night of all the Whose Line Is It Anyways shows, just because of him singing or doing something. So ultimately, to see that kind of carry on into another show. Ultimately, to know that Wayne Brady is eventually going to be on Black Lightning, and he had been hosting Let's Make a Deal and all this other kind of stuff. But Emmy Award winning actor and host. Makes sense. But yeah, Wayne Brady, to me, for the last couple of performances, like I was just like, this sounds like Wayne Brady. Like at first, it really did sound like Jamie Foxx for the longest time. But then eventually, once it came down to the last couple performances, I'm like, this sounds like Wayne Brady. I can't think of anybody else that this would sound like at this point, because you can actually hear what this person sounds like now. So ultimately, another win on the win column, and I have basically uh won this season, meaning I've just guessed more than 50% of people. But ultimately, for this season, it really did come down to the wire. And ultimately, it's just one or two away from otherwise being a losing season. So ultimately, it's like I'm still humble because ultimately, like the first season, I came out way better than this season. And ultimately, I'm sure season three is going to be way harder. So, kind of reviewing ultimately kind of like everything and just like kind of consensing of the fact that it's like, man, what a this is a great season. This is a really great season. The clues were super confusing. It was kind of hilarious what the show determined were clues. If you went through and reviewed all the episode before where they determined what clues were clues, I'm like, those weren't clues. Those weren't clues at all. Like, no rational person would assess that these actually seem like clues. If anything, you would actually need a DVR or something to record this whole thing and or watch it back somewhere and pause at like specific points. Like every 5 seconds, you would have to pause the video to see if you can come up with some kind of clue. But even some of the stuff for clues for people, you would have to personally know them in weirdish like detail. I think the clues for Dr. Drew, you would have to really personally know Dr. Drew very well. Um, ultimately, I think for Ninja, ultimately, I think the wood breaking thing. Like ultimately, if I would have known that this person was a YouTuber, and I would have made that consensus in my head already, then I would have taken the wood chopping thing as just like, oh yeah, maybe it's Ninja. Yeah, that makes sense. But I never put two and two together, and it was too late by that point, because Ninja had been eliminated so early, sadly enough. Um, ultimately, I was just bizarrely thinking of Ashton Kutcher for some reason. I'm like, well, maybe Ashton Kutcher had been on YouTube somewhere and what have you. That guess was wrong. But luckily enough, throughout this season, I had ultimately. It took some doing. It took some going through in my head to really assess and overly guess who quite possibly people could be. And luckily enough, I had been able to guess mostly correct on the season because for some reason, season one, easy as pie. The second season, this guy had no effing clue. like God, there's so many clues that I'm like, these aren't clues. These aren't clues. So now they're already starting season three after the Super Bowl. I really don't want to go into looking at any of the clues or anything like that for season three right this moment. I just kind of want to leave it out there, but I don't want to go out of my way to seek into this stuff out now. I just kind of want to wait it. I just kind of want to sift it out. I just kind of want to revel in the aspect of okay, this show for me right now is in all technicality over for right now. Like I can kind of bask in my overall two in a row I guess you can say winning seasons, but ultimately I'm trying to still ultimately stay humble because ultimately especially this season, not all my guesses were mine. Not every single one of them were mine. So ultimately, but I ultimately could have ultimately blown off all those answers. I ultimately could not have looked in Google. Like I think really the first season, I didn't go into Google at all. I didn't ask for anyone to help me figure out who these people were, and I guessed them regardless. This season, I really needed help. I had no effing clue who people were. This season, especially, um, Googling things was a huge benefit to, or getting a consensus from people somewhere in the ether that ultimately, um, could give me a hint on who they think it is, and I could take that suggestion into myself and really narrow things down a lot more than I originally could. So, like I said, ultimately, season three is going to be after the Super Bowl. From what I've kind of seen from kind of very little visual aspects of season three, there's evidently a character that looks like a banana, which I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to be Jacksepticeye, right? Because he's known for having like a floppy banana and whatever. But um, again, I'm not really looking into clues. I'm not really looking into season three. I'm just um, kind of having a little bit of like, okay, like after this show, um, I'm just gonna kind of just take in and just enjoy the season for what it was and how much good music we got out of it for the most point. There have been a lot of very bland songs throughout this thing, but then there had also been um, some music that I'm like, okay, man, this is actually a really good song. What is this music? And then I go and search it out. Um, yeah, someone you loved was a really good song for this season. That actually was a song that was had been coming out on the radio very frequently. Um, I think that ultimately was like the key performance of this whole season. Uh, but I couldn't help but if you would say like who was the best performer, I couldn't help but say Rottweiler every time. It was just like every single song that he chose was like very effective. Like he didn't go and just sing any just generic Christmas song, or he didn't sing anything that felt consistently generic. So ultimately, I was like, well, hopefully he wins. But ultimately, I like that the Fox won. I like that the Fox won. Um, yeah, Wayne Brady, man. What a star. Like I always really enjoyed him in Whose Line Is It Anyways. Like yeah, he like won like when he was on Whose Line Is It Anyways, like he would always be like the star of that show. So yeah, I couldn't help but also think that okay, well yeah, eventually if he goes on to another show, he's gonna be a star there, and surefire enough, he was. So yeah, just weird oddball guessing for this season. Ultimately, not really going on to any of the clues at all this season. Just ultimately just guessing via my ears who the person could be. And I kind of did that in the first season too. Like, yeah, there were clues here and there about some stuff, but ultimately, I never really tied myself to a lot of them for this season. For the first season, like I was really relying on the clues, um, but ultimately, like once you kind of consistently hear someone's sound, it's like, well, yeah, clearly it's this guy, and like a lot of people just thought I was crazy because a lot of people were thinking like, man, you're really going with some shots in the dark, and then surefire enough, someone will get unmasked and it would be that person. For this season, I think everybody was starting to slowly but surely come to the same consensus I had, but reasonably, it just took them a while, except for the judges. The judges, man, like they just stuck to their guns for the entire season. A lot of the times, their guesses never changed, seemingly, and or finally, there was a relenting that their guesses finally changed. And ultimately, I would just say, like, God, why did it take so long? Why did it take so long? Like, you would think that with a lot of people that would ultimately guess these things and guess them correctly, you would think that the judges would like guess a lot more correctly, except for maybe Ken because Ken does it as a comedic aspect. But he did guess one right this season, so give him that. Ken always has a thing where he just has to guess one correct for the entire season, and that's all he's got to do. That's if he like guesses one right for the entire season, like it's not like they're like if he guesses every single one of them wrong, it's not like they're not going to have him on the next season because he gets one wrong. And I love Ken. Ken is great. Now Ken basically has a catchphrase, which people are gonna go and say every time. So I guess eventually Ken is just gonna have a catchphrase, and he's probably gonna put it on a shirt somewhere or something like that. Um, and even McCarthy did the catchphrase as well on the last show, which was kind of funny. Um, yeah, it's a good season. How long have I been talking for? Almost 40 minutes. So I'm gonna get out of here because reasonably, who would want me to gush about this entire season as a whole for 40 minutes? Probably not a lot of people. But I won this season. I've won 2 seasons in a row. It's just sad that I never thought to record the first season. Um, Man, I wish I would have done that. It would have been fun. Ultimately, looking at it now, yeah, this would have been so much fun. But I didn't think about it, sadly enough. But but I'm always honest. Like I'm always honest. Like I don't freaking um, I don't lie to people. I don't try to manipulate things and say that it's like, oh no, yeah, I really did suck the entire first season, but now I used Google and then I got every right answer in this season. No, the first season, um, I was like guessing them without Google or out no kind of assist nowhere. Um, it just felt like it was just I don't know, it was some kind of weird, bizarre like thing. That I could just pick all these people out of a hat. The only person that I guessed incorrectly for a bulk of what I remember from the first season was really just the T Pain and the Peacock, the Donny Osmond. I think those were really the wrong ones. There was maybe some like comedians or something like that I guess wrong and what have you, but anyways, bulk of the time I guess right. For this season, um, like how eventually it came down to the Fox consistently mentioning that he's worked with Doogie Howser and Doubtfire, which I'm like, okay, well, Neil Patrick Harris, he worked, Wayne Brady worked with Neil Patrick Harris on How I Met Your Mother, and Mrs. Doubtfire is Robin Williams, which Wayne Brady had worked with Robin Williams on Whose Line Is It Anyways. So, yeah, I was basically just like, yeah, and Wayne Brady had also worked with Joey Fatone, I think, also on Whose Line Is It Anyways, and I think numerous times over, Joey Fatone has probably hosted some shows, and Wayne Brady has hosted some shows as well, kind of on the same keel as him. So eventually they're probably good friends and what have you, and whatever. Anyways, um, let's call this one a wrap. Another winning season for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know how. But the second season is going to be tougher. We're not gonna have any nowhere near close to figuring out who these people are for this third season. It's probably all gonna be athletes. It's probably gonna be all be bizarrish YouTubers that we've never heard of, or it's going to eventually be these but supposedly this next season it's supposed to be supposedly having bigger stars, meaning I'm assuming maybe like A-list celebrities maybe, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to figure that out then, because if this show says that they have oh yeah, you better believe this show has a huge budget and you won't ever know who these people are. I'm like, yeah, I probably won't know who these people are, because if you're saying the floodgates are open and now you can get any person on the show, who the heck is gonna know who these people are? Um, so hopefully there's good guesses coming out there. I know I'm probably gonna be wrong a lot on this third season, so maybe this third season I will take a giant hit. I'm assuming that's what's going to happen. I'm going to lose this entire third season. I have a feeling that I'm going to lose the entire third season. So for that reason and that reason alone, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.